It's funny because when you think about that, about kids and education, children and education, you think that, you know, you don't want to see them hanging out on the street. You want to see them in school. You want to know that once they graduate, they're going to get a good job and they might be good neighbors. You might want them to live next door to you, instead of going, wow, that's my neighbor who didn't graduate from high school, who can't read, who can't get a job, who might be breaking into my house the next day. I think those are sorts of things that some people are starting to kind of equate with, because we have so many crime problems and things like that in our country.
Right, and people are seeing now that the education system that was designed 50, 70 years ago, where you could have a high school diploma and go out and get a good middle class job at an auto company or a manufacturing company or whatever it may be, those days are gone. And we are now competing with the likes of China and India. And you open up the newspaper and look at the help wanted ads, and companies want a higher degree. And so if we're turning out kids in the K-12 system that can't even read, and that can't do math, and that can't write, how are we going to expect them to get a higher degree? And so, I mean, you take the example of the student or the graduate that we interviewed in the Detroit segment, and you know, you feel for somebody like that, because they have been left behind in the system. Somehow they were passed along year after year, and obviously it's not just a one-time thing, because it's not like you get to a 12th grade and suddenly you can't remember how to read. I mean, that doesn't happen. And so it's a consistent assembly line problem, and it needs to be dealt with, because I mean, you feel for somebody like that who is lacking those basic skills, and then you look at the literacy clinic that they go to, who then has to do the job of what the public school system should have been doing for the last 12 years. And I think that Americans are finally, as you said, understanding that we've got a major problem on our hands, and we can't just simply expect students to have a very limited amount of skills and go out and be a productive member of society. Those days are over.
We never really had to compete before, and we fall, we're like in the middle as far as our kids are in math and science, right?
Yeah, you look at those statistics and it's discouraging. And here we have been the superpower in the world for decades. And when you look at those statistics and you realize that we are 25th globally in math scores, and we're 24th globally in science scores, but yet per point, when you look at those scores, we are spending the most of any country. And so we are spending the most of any country and getting very mediocre, lackluster results. And it hurts our place in the world. It's showing that we are being passed by countries, and it's not just, you know, wealthy countries. I mean, we're being passed by countries like Iceland and Hungary. And it's time for all the adults within the education system, taxpayers, parents, everyone to say, this is not tolerable anymore. We're not going to tolerate this. And so parents, like we're seeing in California, who are taking over their schools, people are standing up and saying, the days of putting the interests of adults first are over, and we need to act like it.
How does a parent get a politician involved in this to say, you know what, I've had enough. I can't afford to have my kid go to this school where they're not getting an education, so you as a politician need to step up and help me do something about this?
Well, I am of the belief that politicians will do the bare minimum until they are more afraid of parents than they are of unions. Because what we have shown is that unions throw a lot of money around into campaigns, into advertising and putting boots on the ground for candidates and those types of things. And so they have, through those things, they have earned their influence and earned their power. And so when parents, and obviously the structure is different, but when parents do the same type of thing, and I'm not saying they should, you know, unionize, but when parents say, you know, I am going to hold you, politician, accountable for what is going on in our schools, and when politicians feel that heat, that's when we'll start to see more change.
Speaking of accountability, there are some reforms out there that are working, and they're working for cheaper. Like charter schools, for example. Some charter schools educate a child at a better level than a public school does, and they do it cheaper. I mean, that's just the bottom line. It just seems like a common sense thing that if something's working and it's cheaper than what we're spending, because I think, what is it, $13,000 per student in the U.S. on average?
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's just it. If we're seeing results from different options that parents have, we should be replicating those options, supporting those options, and getting parents and giving parents access to those options. And so I don't believe that charter schools are the silver bullet. There really is no silver bullet to fix the system. There are many things that need to happen. But that being said, if we're all in this for the interest of the children, like we all claim to be, most notably unions when they hold up their signs saying we put children first, then we need to act like it. Because if we are first and foremost interested in a quality education for every child in America, then we should not be worried about our paycheck and our level of comfort, but we should be attempting to deliver that quality education to every child, regardless of what that means for us.
Then there should be some kind of flexibility then, whether it's a charter school, whether it's a public school or a private school, there should be some kind of flexibility in the system and in the work rules so that things get done.
One of the things that I like about charter schools is that very few of them are unionized. And what does that mean? That means you don't have a huge thick contract with work rules and lots of words like can't and won't and all of those types of things. I mean, for example, in Chicago Public Schools, the contract for Chicago Public Schools is 232 pages. Now, my question would be, how does 232 pages of work rules spur innovation, creativity, those types of things? It doesn't. But what we see in the typical charter school is that it's not unionized, and so therefore you've got a better working relationship between teachers and administrators. There's more of a can-do, student-focused attitude, which I think is very healthy, and that's what needs to happen across the system.
Well, you know, like in the state of Indiana, they're working on some aggressive things coming up for 2011. They're looking at putting a cap on their negotiated contracts. They're looking at maybe some kind of performance merit pay for teachers to reward those who are actually effective. You know, how does all that work? Why aren't more people saying, you know what, let's open this up, let's give the schools some flexibility, and let's make it work for the effective teachers?
Well, I think that's starting. I mean, just the fact that Indiana is talking about it. And one of the things that I like that has come out of Indiana is the growth model. Because a lot of times you hear from unions that they don't like performance pay or merit pay because, well, the teacher can't control who's in their classroom. Well, but the teacher can control, to a very large degree, the growth that happens in that child in that 1 year of instruction. And so what I like about the growth model is that it compensates for that. So in other words, if there's a 6th grade student who comes into that classroom reading at the 4th grade level, if at the end of that year they're either reading at the 5th grade level or even the 6th grade or 7th grade level, then clearly we have seen that that teacher has had a very positive impact on that student and that student's growth. And so then that teacher would be compensated for that. And that's the way it works in the private sector, is people are compensated for their performance and for their output. And that's the way it should work in our public schools. Because again, we need to be incentivizing innovation, effective teaching, and with that, the system will improve.
Well, it sounds something similar like former Florida Governor Jeb Bush was saying, that a year's worth of instruction, a year's worth of knowledge for a year's worth of instruction is basically what we're all looking for kids nowadays. It seems like that's a common sense thing, and that's something that the education system should be working for, a year's worth of knowledge for a year's worth of instruction.
It makes sense. I mean, it's so common sense it almost seems absurd, but it makes sense. And again, I think what we're dealing with is the auto model that's been imposed on public schools decades ago, where we are currently operating in the vast majority of public schools across America. We're operating from this position where every teacher is equally effective, every teacher is equally competent in those types of things, works just as much as everybody else and all of those types of things, and common sense says that that is not true. And so we need to be incentivizing that effective work, that harder work, and then those teachers that aren't effective or are deemed ineffective should find another line of work. And you know, people say that that's harsh, but it's what needs to happen, because as I said earlier, if we are all truly in this for the children and we have the best interest of children at heart, then we need to be acting like it.
All right, now we all know that there are some bad schools out there, and that affects everybody, whether you're a parent or not. We need our children in this country to excel so that our country can excel again. And we want to keep the children off the streets, and we want them educated, and we want them well educated. And that's what this is about. We're not teacher bashing. What we are trying to do is show that there is a problem right now in the American education system, and it's broken, and quite frankly, it needs to be fixed. And to see all of our films, go to kidsoncars.com.